So hello, and thank you so much for joining us for the launch of the free downloadable book Antarcticness. My name is Elan Kelman, and I had the pleasure of editing this volume with all of our wonderful authors. Obviously, we are not especially here to celebrate given world events. Instead, we are offering hope. In times of war, we can and should think of peace. And whatever is happening or happens today and over the coming days, we still see Antarctica and should see Antarctica as a continent of peace, of bringing humanity together, and for decades it has done so, showing what we can achieve together when we want to and when we try. So welcome to our wonderful authors who will be describing their contributions and their thoughts about Antarcticness. As mentioned, it is a free download. So please just type in Antarcticness into any search engine and you can get a PDF, or if you wish to order a hard copy. I'll put some blogs on the topic into the chat as well as the link. And now over to our guests and our authors. And we will be starting with Jelena to describe her thoughts about Antarcticness from an outside perspective. Thank you, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ellen. It is my pleasure to speak today at the launch of this book that so excellently reflects the community of people that work on, in, and about Antarctica, the book that reflects the connections that many of us have to this magnificent place, whether we have been there in real life or only imagine it. That would be the case for me, and also responsibilities that we have toward Antarctica. And this is what I would like to talk about today, and talk about the Rights of Antarctica initiative advocated by a group of academics, lawyers, and civil society members, the group that I've been part of since early summer of last year. And quoting from the foreword of the book, beginning of the quote, "We are all part of nature, and Antarctica is a part of all of us. We can all be a voice of protection for Antarctica," end of the quote. The authors of the foreword, Cristiana Figueres and Musumbi Kanayora, invite the reader to respect and to celebrate the natural world that we are part of. So the goal of the Rights of Antarctica is to put these words in action, to draft a document, a declaration that would establish the rights of Antarctica similar to the rights of nature initiatives, and to establish, most importantly, our duties that correlate to these rights, the duties toward Antarctica. The aim is to have open process to everyone and get feedback from everyone, so to have a democratically created declaration, and to launch it on Earth Day later this year on April 22nd for signatures by states and NGOs. As a group advocating for this initiative, we believe that the current legal systems don't match the physical reality, and that recognizing the rights of Antarctica is essential to rocking the existing status quo, which is based on the colonial way of thinking of exploitation and appropriation of resources. And it's hard to challenge the status quo unless there's an alternative vision. So this is what we really trying to do, to create an alternative vision and to move away from the colonial way of thinking and toward the way of thinking that views Antarctica as a living community that we as humans ought to respect and protect, and to be its voice when needed. And that is very much reflective of the book. As Gabriella Roldan and Hannah Nielsen write in chapter 3, imagination about what Antarctica was predated any exploration. So the Rights of Antarctica initiative invites you to join in imagining what it could be like if rights of Antarctica were recognized. And perhaps then the next era in Antarctica will not be about exploring, heroism, or conquest, but the era of humility, respect, and celebration of Antarctica. Now, let me share the screen and I will go over the declaration. Let me see. I lost it. All right. I think that should be good. Okay, good. I'll just go into this mode. Just to give credit to, actually, I didn't make the PowerPoint slides. Cormac Cullinan, who is part of the group, so I want to give him credit. He's an international lawyer from South Africa. And we used the slides at Global Greens Congress, which is a congress that brings green parties together from across the world. And we talked about the declaration a couple weeks ago. Okay, so the declaration consists of preamble and 13 articles. I will not be, for the sake of time, going over all of them, but I will just right now in the overview say which article talks about what. So Article 1 defines how we understand Antarctica. Article 2 defines the legal status of Antarctica. And Article 3 builds on it and defined inherent rights and freedoms of Antarctica and its members. Article 4, just like Antarctic Treaty, Article 4 talks about territorial claims. Unlike Antarctic Treaty, it plainly rejects any territorial claims and ownership of Antarctica. Article 5 through 7 cover human relationships and duties and also defines what activities are permissible. Article 8 through 9 is about decision making and what it could be like if Antarctica were represented in forums such as UN and Antarctic Treaty System. Article 10 covers measures to implement declaration, so it's actually effective. Article 11 is about dispute resolution, and Article 12 talks about relationship between the declaration and existing treaties such as Antarctic Treaty and other relevant international regimes. So the preamble starts with the peoples of Earth celebrating the beautiful wild continent we know as Antarctica. Preamble defines Antarctica as the living community that plays the vital role in maintaining the ecological stability and health of the whole Earth community. It also states that we are conscious of the grave threats that some human activities pose to the health of this community. Preamble continues and accepts that we have collective responsibilities to safeguard Antarctica from harm by humans. It also states that Antarctica should be free from claims of ownership, as I said previously, and harmful human influences. Preamble also calls upon all peoples, organizations, and institutions to take responsibility to promote effective recognition and observance of the rights and duties established in this declaration. So going into some of the articles for the remaining minutes that I have, Article 1 defines what Antarctic community encompasses, and that it is not it is a subject, not an object. It is actually a holder of rights. Article 2 defines legal status of Antarctica. So Antarctica would be defined as self-regulating and autonomous, as being beyond any national jurisdiction and not subject to state sovereignty, as a legal subject with capacity to hold rights and exercise freedoms, and also as being composed of members, which in themselves are legal subjects with rights and freedoms. Elaborating on that, Article 3 define inherent rights and freedoms of Antarctica and its members, and also corresponding respect by humans to protect these rights. Now, going into the human relationship with Antarctica, Article 5 lays down the principles that must be observed by humans and states in relation to Antarctica and Antarctic community members. And the principles can be, for example, regarding respecting other beings, relationality and reciprocity, also making decisions on the basis of what will be best for the long-term integrity of Antarctic community, and also taking responsibility for human actions. Article 7 defines what human activities or impacts would be permissible within the Antarctic area, but it also considers actions that happen outside of Antarctic area, because of course we know what happens in Antarctica is in largely result of what happens outside of Antarctica. Now, Article 8 would, going into decision making in relation to Antarctica, this article would require establishment of institutional arrangements to ensure that the declaration is implemented properly, and that different interests and perspectives, such as, for example, indigenous people perspectives, are represented in decision making fora. And Article 9 covers how the Antarctica and its members would be represented in human institutions. This may include, for example, participation in Antarctic treaty system and United Nations, and also in legal proceedings before national and international courts. This article tries to answer the questions, how would and how should and how could really human representatives for Antarctica be selected, appointed, and recognized? Lastly, Article 10 will lay down the measures that humans and states must observe to give effect to the declaration. And this can be, for example, amending existing treaties, such as the Protocol or Antarctic Treaty, to accord with the declaration, and also making provision for Antarctica to be represented in national courts, and to promote actions to inform people about Antarctic community. And I don't have time. I wanted to share the webpage, but if you have more questions, it is antarcticarights.org, and you can download declaration, give us comments. There's an email at the bottom of the page. And on this note, just for the sake of time, I will wrap up. But in a nutshell, the initiative invites you, just like the book in the end of the foreword, to be the voice for Antarctica when it is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A wonderful overview, and feel free to put the link into the chat to everyone. Our next guest speaker, also providing an external perspective about Antarcticness, has unfortunately fallen quite ill, but had the foresight to provide a pre-recorded video.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this book launch today. My name's Kate Stockings, and I teach geography full-time and in a comprehensive school in London. I've had a keen interest in Arcticness and this book since the beginning of the idea, and I'm really pleased to be speaking as my small contribution to this book and the book launch. So as I said, I've been teaching 11 to 18-year-olds geography in London for the last 7 years. And as you can see from the images on the screen, I teach about Antarctica. But what do I teach, when, and why? That's what I want to speak to you about today, and hopefully you'll find it useful and perhaps thought-provoking about what's going on in our classrooms in the UK with regards to the continent. My Twitter and my email are on the screen, so please do get in touch after if you have any questions, any ideas, or any ways that we could take this further. So, as I said, I've always taught Antarctica. For those of you who don't know the English system, we have a lot of freedom with what we can teach our 11 to 14-year-olds. We follow the national curriculum of the UK, which does lay out some detail of what we can teach, but it's not overly prescriptive. It doesn't state, for example, that all schools must teach about Antarctica before students reach 14. And yet many do. So why do so many geography teachers choose to teach about this continent? Why is the teaching of Antarctica of value? Should we teach this continent to our students? And if we choose to, how are we ensuring that it is taught in the very, very best way possible? These are some of the questions I'd like to pose in the next 9 minutes or so. So in England, our government guidance makes it clear that by the time a student reaches 14, the end of Key Stage 3 on the right-hand side of this screen, this is what they should be able to do. Obviously, I've only included the components that are relevant to Antarctica today, but you can see that by the time a student is 14, the government says that they must be able to clearly locate Antarctica, including the Antarctic Circle. They should be able to identify Antarctica as a polar desert, including what characteristics result in it being a polar desert. And they must understand the key geographical processes linked to glaciation. So all students must be familiar with the continent, and yet many schools do much, much more than this. Why? Well, when we look at the broader aims of the English national curriculum, we can see these two statements are included. And if we're going to develop our contextual knowledge of the location of globally significant places, terrestrial and marine, and if we're going to understand the processes that give rise to key physical and human geographical features of the world and how these are interdependent, can we do it without teaching Antarctica? Now, if you're here and interested in the continent and attending this book launch, you're probably going to argue that no, we have to teach about Antarctica in order to fully fulfill those aims that are in the English national curriculum. I'd agree. I think Antarctica is a fantastic lens through which to study these two aims. So why are we teaching about Antarctica? How are we using it in our geography lessons to achieve those aims? Well, this is what I think most people do currently. I think most people choose to study Antarctica as a place. They use it as a way to teach our students that places matter, that places are unique, and that they're uniquely influenced by the processes and the human interactions that happen in that place. I think many of us also teach Antarctica as a way of which to show how interconnected the world is, as a way of which to show that the world is infinitely connected, and that our local actions are interdependent on a global scale. If we're thinking about the Anthropocene and the way that we're teaching about the interconnections of our planet, perhaps it is non-debatable that Antarctica should be taught. But are these 3 bullet points, is this rich and powerful geographical knowledge? Is this really taking our students beyond what they could likely get from a David Attenborough documentary? Is this really taking our students beyond the familiar and beyond their everyday lessons? I'd argue that perhaps there's not. Perhaps there's not that much here that really is stretching our students to engage with Antarctica. So what is that powerful geographical knowledge? What knowledge do we as a geography teacher community want our students to know about Antarctica that they couldn't get without a subject specialist teaching them? I'd argue that this is a discussion and a reflection that our community of geography teachers needs to have. Now, in the book, they talk about the Antarctic flag competition of the UK Polar Network, and I love this competition. I take part in it every year, have taken part in it for several years, and the students absolutely adore it. And yet each year it reminds me of the single lens through which our students can see the continent. And you can see here one theme is reoccurring, and that is that of penguins. Is there a danger in our teaching that we can sometimes reduce this rich continent and this rich geographical area to the home of penguins? I think perhaps sometimes there is. I think I've been guilty of it in the past, of reducing Antarctica to a home of penguins. So how do we avoid that? That's the question and the discussion I want to spark today. How do we decide what the powerful knowledge about Antarctica might be? And how can we get the academic community to help us, to help the geography teacher community in that discussion? How can we ensure that teachers who are incredibly busy people, but they are incredibly committed, how can we ensure they've got the resources that they need to keep their subject knowledge absolutely up to date? So is this the powerful knowledge that we want people to be teaching about Antarctica? Do we want our teachers to be focusing on the physical processes of the continent as a contested area, as a continent, as a home to resources and a home to possible future uses that are really, really contested? And do we want to perhaps use Antarctica as a showcase for multilateralism, thinking about the Antarctic Treaty and thinking about that idea of global commons? They're just 3 ideas I had as to how we could tweak our teaching of the continent to ensure that we're going so much further beyond that home of penguins. But whatever we decide, whatever the geography and the wider community decide, I think we need to work together and we need to help in having that conversation. We need to learn from the experts. We, the geography teacher, we need to learn from the people who study the continent at the highest level to ensure that we've got the knowledge to teach it. And I think that's where I know that's where this book is going to help us. This book is going to be able to go out to geography teachers and ignite that conversation. What are the various different ways that we can think about this continent, and what is the knowledge that we should be teaching? Thank you for listening, and hopefully I've given you plenty to think about there. As I say, I teach Antarctica. I'm going to continue to teach Antarctica to our 11 to 14-year-olds, but how can we make it the absolute best teaching possible? Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you so much to Kate, and to inspire us to educate and to think about people upcoming with these concepts of Antarctica. Over to Rosa.
Hello, everybody. Well, first of all, I want to thank a lot that I was accepted to be writing in this book, and that was thanks also to another. I'm from Ecuador, and you would say Ecuador and Antarctica. And I want to thank also Daniela Cajiao, who was the person that introduced me to this whole project. As a South American from Ecuador, we have never been able to imagine ourselves as a country that has anything to do with Antarctica. We are, the name of our country is a line. So we are the equator, and we always thought that would be that. So talking about Antarcticness has a little bit of a story, and unfortunately, I will not be able to share any of the images. So I don't know if you can share maybe the images from the book, but it's okay. You will also be able to see it from the free book, which I think it's amazing, because being an open source publication, it will give a lot of opportunities to people that don't have any idea of how to relate with the white continent, to relate to it from a very different points of view. So going back to why did I end up in Antarctica, being an artist and being from Ecuador and being a mestizo and being having nothing to do with the science and the technology and the, all the skills needed to be in Antarctica. In year 2012, the Ministry of Culture of Ecuador, amazingly enough, decided to make an artist in residence program in Antarctica. And it was part of a series of artist in residence programs related to the territories, the extreme territories that have to do with the geography of such a small country as Ecuador. The Amazon is one of them, the Galapagos Islands is one of them, and the Antarctica is one of them. All of these territories have been, as you know, under constant threat by extractivism or human ingerence in those territories. And the idea was to put artists to work and to analyze what the territories are and what these, far away geographies have to do with our own ways of life. So my project was, as you know, the first speaker was talking, this was a need for the first time to talk about a decolonial point of view from Antarctica. I am super happy that someone is doing this rights of Antarctica Charter, because from Ecuador, we are the first country in the world who accepted the rights of nature in the Constitution. And this instrument has been able to protect a lot of territories that have always been under, the menace of, especially of extractivism. So how do you look at Antarctica from a different point of view? When I started studying Antarctica and seeing what it was all about, I saw that there was this history that has been told always back by white male European heroes, and nothing was being told from a small little country like Ecuador. So as a mythology, when I was in Antarctica, I opened a blog that was the Archive of the Ice, and that's the beginning of an impossible approach to Antarctica, which is archiving ice. You cannot archive something that would melt, and that's when my thought about how can I create impossible actions as an artist in Antarctica. One of them was to create this archive that my husband back in Rome was taking care of, imagining what was going on there. And we were investigating on all the southern ways of being and of looking to Antarctica. So maybe the Mapuche women in Chile were the first ones to put a foot on Antarctica, or maybe people from South Africa were the first people to put a foot on Antarctica. So in a way, I wanted to deconstruct the whole territory. At the same time, I was trying to do a very strange action in Antarctica. I was trying to perform the equatorial line in Antarctica. So every day I was walking in the territory of the Pedro Vicente Maldonado station in the Antarctic islands, tracing a red line that would be the equator line, which was absolutely impossible because we had a lot of wind and we had a lot of different conditions. So I thought, yes, what I'm trying to do as an artist is to flip around the idea of conquest, the idea of control, the idea of territorial spaces. By doing so, I was just tracing this line with a red ribbon that would never place into the land. And I had the most inadequate instruments to do so. So that was another thing that I was so interested in when I was in Antarctica. And also, the idea was to try and think about what would be, as I told you, the other ways of conquest Antarctica. Too often in traditional representations of Antarctica, the southern space has been considered as the last frontier of human conquering. I'm so sorry, my English is a bit bad right now. Predominantly for the Western Caucasian era, as I told you. This masculine, white, fearless, and courageous. The challenge, therefore, is to unveil older narratives. And that's something that I did by bringing a set of different colors of flags, of the Antarctica flag, but changing the colors. And I took pictures of all the women that were in that moment of time in the mission. And that was interesting because it was, different faces. And also I can't share it, but I might be sending this to Ilan. One of the most beautiful pictures that I took and that I had made in Antarctica was the soccer team from the Ecuadorian mission. And that was amazing because most of our people from Ecuador, they come from the coastline and they are used to very warm weather, and they are soccer players. So we had all these people in shorts posing outside of the Antarctic station, the Pedro Vicente Maldonado, taking a picture as, the national soccer team from a South American mestizo country in the middle of the Antarctica. Why am I saying all these things? Because by using images as an artist, I wanted to give back or propose a different view from Antarctica. Not only this white, amazingly beautiful continent where amazing photographers can take pictures and have the beauty of it coming out, but also some kind of a different thought. What can we all as humans do for Antarctica? How can we look at it in a different way? Maybe the best picture that you can take from Antarctica is the one that you won't be able to make, because we will be able to maybe control or restrain the massive tourism or the ideas of the end of the Antarctic Treaty and extractivism being there waiting to get into Antarctica, or as South Americans, as people from the South, it will be maybe a new view that will be, a guarantee to preserve Antarctica for all humanity and for all people from all the world. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. And that's it. Thank you, Ila. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Muchas gracias, Rosa. Delighted to have you here. And now over to Jan.
Thank you very much, Ilan. So I'd like to present you a chapter that I wrote together with my colleagues, Pedro Marques Quintero from Lisbon, Walter Epic from Dublin, and Mirko Antina from Madrid. And we are a team of psychologists specialized in team science. So our chapter is called Dealing with Antarcticness. This is the title, and it is a guide for teams that want to be successful in this beautiful dynamic but also at the same time dangerous environment that we define as Antarcticness. We base our recommendations on a study we conducted actually in Antarctica with over 40 scientists, glaciologists, mountaineers, drivers, engineers, mechanics, but also cooks that worked and lived in Antarctica. The ABC of effective teams in Antarctica means 1, anticipation. Anticipate the unexpected. Teams should plan, but also be flexible and adapt their plans constantly. B stands for build social relationships. In Antarctica, it is crucial to build a functioning social network for your productivity, but also for your well-being. And finally, C stands for collective reflection, which describes the process of collectively reflecting about teamwork, the tasks, the goals, and the processes, and adapt these in order to grow collectively as a team. So anticipation, building social relationships, and collective reflection are powerful strategies for teams in Antarctica to deal with this volatile, dangerous, yet beautiful environment that is Antarcticness. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful, Jan. Dankeschön. Now, we heard from Kate about the Antarctic Flags project. We will hear about the chapter. Over to you, Sami.
Well, thanks, Ilan, for inviting me to be part of this book. I have to say, as a mathematician by background, the idea of writing a book chapter was quite daunting. So I really appreciate your support throughout the process. And also thank you to my co-author, TJ Young, who will be presenting at the book launch later today as well, for your excellent work throughout the chapter and help with shaping it into what it was. So Kate very helpfully introduced the project for me, so that saves me a lot of my job this morning. But I'll just tell you a little bit more about the background of the project and why we chose to write a book chapter about Antarctic flags. So Antarctica does not have a flag. It's not a country. It has no indigenous population, and there is no government. So why every year are hundreds of flags designed for Antarctica sent to the continent from all over the world if that continent is only to be used for peaceful activities? So here you can see some examples of the flag project taking place. So first of all, there is a photo of children preparing their flags at school, and this project has taken part on almost every continent worldwide from multiple countries. We include a map within the book of all the different places that have participated. And the children, each school is able to send a small number of flags because obviously the number of people going to Antarctica is limited. So that's why it's run as a competition. Then each school gets a certificate and photos and contact with the scientists or staff who end up taking their flags down to Antarctica. Now, in the chapter, we talk a little about the history of the project, first of all, because although it's now run by the UK Polar Network, the idea was initially conceived by Paul Arthur Bergman and Julie Hambrook Bergman. So Paul is an academic who has worked in Antarctica and worked a lot in the area kind of around the politics of Antarctica. And the idea of the Flags project is something that himself and his wife developed. School children design their flags from multiple locations worldwide. This project is run as a competition because we have limited personnel going to Antarctica, but each school is allowed to select a small number of flags. And I believe that was brought down to one flag during the pandemic, as even though there were only very, very small numbers of people going to Antarctica during 2020, the UK Polar Network still managed to run this competition. But each school gets a certificate and photos of their flag or flags being displayed in Antarctica by scientists or personnel on the bases in Antarctica, who are all volunteers. I should say this project is completely run by volunteers, both on the side of UK Polar Network and also those who take the flags on top of their already very busy research schedules in Antarctica. So I should say quickly that if you are interested in taking part, either if you know people who'd like to participate from the flag design point of view, or even better, if you're able to help out with taking flags, then please do contact the UK Polar Network, as this project has now been running for many years, so they're always looking out for more people to help out. And so I would just like to finish off by talking a little bit about why we think this project matters, because of course Antarctica is somewhere that most of the participants in this project are likely never able to get to. But one of the reasons that Julie Hambrook Bergman feels so passionate about this project, and when I spoke to her about the history of her setting it up and passing it on to the UK Polar Network, her long-term goal is that a sufficient number of the next generation understand the scientific importance of Antarctica, and within the collaborative context of the Antarctic Treaty. It's her gift to the world, essentially, this project, and also a book that she created called Celebrating Antarctica, that's given out to school children, that these future leaders are then able to learn about Antarctica in school, participate in this activity, and then when they become those leaders, they're able to balance national interests with international concerns. For example, in the event that any country decided to renege on the Antarctic Treaty, then Antarctica then has a civil society to rely on, advocating for its ideals of Antarcticness. So I'll just end with Julie's words: we're all on this planet together, and thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Sammy. So wonderful to see the Flags project, and thank you for the invitation to everyone to be involved. Hannah, please go ahead.
Kia ora, hola, hello. I'm speaking today from Nipaluna, Hobart, from the land, seas and waterways of the Muinina people, and I honour their elders, past, present and emerging. In Tasmania, we're here on the edge of the Southern Ocean. We experience Antarctic blasts in the weather, polar-themed statues dot the waterfront, local hotels tell the tale of the time Amundsen came to stay, and the region is home to the highest concentration of Antarctic researchers per capita of anywhere in the world. Each summer, icebreakers leave our port bound for the far south, including the new Noyina, named for the Palawakani word for the Southern Lights. So it's a really good place to be if you like Antarctica. And that's why I came here to the University of Tasmania. But that seed of Antarcticness, an interest in the far south, was planted long before any link with the continent itself began. It was there in the blizzard experience at Kaylee Tarleton's aquarium in Auckland. It was the toy penguin gifted on a teenage date. It was a missing appendix and my brain dredging up the story of the Russian doctor who removed his own one Antarctic winter. So the stories came first. They were buried deep and they continue to grow in unexpected ways. In our chapter, Gabriella Roldan, who's based in Christchurch, and I write about 5 Antarctic cities. Remote when viewed from a northern perspective, these cities are connected by the continuity of the Southern Ocean around the Southern Rim. We argue that Antarctica matters to these communities. Their Antarcticness is a multi-layered connection, constructed and reconstructed over time, and it's there in the fabric of the social identity. Antarctica matters to us too. It's a place we've worked in, studied, and lived in proximity to. It fascinates, it calls, and it makes our hearts sing. And although peace and science are at the heart of the Antarctic Treaty System, it's not just a place for scientists. It's a place for stories, for global connections that matter to us all. So we close our contribution by suggesting that Antarcticness need not be an exclusionary concept, reserved only for those who have had the privilege of travelling to the southern continent. Rather, once a connection with the place has been established, be that via festivals, books, weather patterns, or historical narratives, it is possible to sit anywhere in the world and engage with Antarctica in a meaningful way. So congratulations on the launch of this book. It's really exciting to see so many perspectives on and connections to the far south collected together in such a beautiful format. Thank you too for the opportunity to say hello from one of those 5 Antarctic cities here at this launch. And we hope that these stories can help you to foster a sense of Antarcticness wherever in the world you may be.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Really exciting to learn about these cities, and we will now hear from Homeward Bound.
Thank you everyone for joining us. So this morning we have a brief 5 minutes to share with you some extracts from our chapter. We decided that would be the thing that we would enjoy doing the most, just to share some of what we've written. And I'd like to say that it's been so wonderful to hear from some of the other chapter authors and to see the faces behind some of the emails over the past 2 years. So I'll get started. Homeward Bound is a groundbreaking global leadership training program for women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine, with a close bond to Antarctica. Homeward Bound aims to heighten the influence and impact of women making decisions that shape our planet by training 1,000 women over 10 years. And this vision has recently been updated to train 10,000 women by 2036. As of December 2020, which shows you how long we've been writing this chapter, the Homeward Bound network comprised of 410 women representing 45 nationalities and has now grown in number and diversity. We are united in the knowledge that we are stronger together, and we are able and willing to lead, and we are taking action with impact. Each woman has her own story, as all of you also do. At the time of writing, 4 cohorts of women in the Homeward Bound programme have travelled to Antarctica, and a 5th cohort is waiting to find out if this will become a reality for them. And I was just checking the website, and there is actually a woman from Ecuador in the 5th cohort, so I'll share her details with you, Rosa, as I'm sure you'd love to connect. The Homeward Bound programme has just introduced its 7th cohort in the past few months. Could you be part of the next cohort? The programme includes a year of remote learning, followed by a 3-week Antarctic expedition, which you can see a little snippet of in the photo. There's Hannah in the middle. But what we discover and our relationship to Antarctica is entirely individual. In this chapter, we could not hope to represent all experiences of this diverse community, but we aim to share the essence of our story through a blend of individual and shared memories, and a collective feeling of Antarcticness. We invite you to join us on our leadership journey and the expedition to Antarctica through the stages of embarking, crossing, arriving, exploring, returning, emerging, and imagining. I'll pass you on to Hannah.
Hello, I'm going to read a short extract from Crossing. We are now in the moment after the beginning. There's no turning back. The moment when the journey becomes real. The moment after the anticipation, when the real challenges of the journey start to reveal themselves. Together, we support each other through any discomfort, knowing that challenge can reap rewards. We muster the courage to step forward into a world unknown to many of us, to forge a different path. We venture into this unknown to create a better world, a better way of being and thinking, a better way of leading, together. I'll hand over to Anne.
Thank you. I'm Anne, calling from Montpellier in the south of France. This is an extract from Returning. This transition period back to South America allows us to look back at the imposter syndrome we all shared before becoming Antarcticans. So many of us were convinced that Homeward Bound would not select us, that Antarctica would remain a dream. Yet here we are, braving the waves coming back from Antarctica. We are now ambassadors set to protect this remote, fragile, and immense beauty. And we will stay stubbornly optimistic to protect it, because we are stronger together. Land is now in sight, and we are struck by the fact that icebergs are already so far away. Only yesterday I could close my eyes and reopen them to the peaceful Antarctic beauty. Yet now, they are a memory or a photograph. When I close my eyes, I can see my home and my family. I'm turning over to Stephanie for an extract on emerging.
Good morning or good day, everyone. So I will read a short passage from Emerging. It is very comforting to know that whenever we step up and we fall or fail, there is a group of women behind us to support us and to help us back up. Stronger together and stubborn optimism have become life mottos. We, as women, need to step up for our values and beliefs. The worldwide health and environmental crisis we are currently facing require compassionate, authentic, and strong leadership. Together, we can and we will build a more sustainable and inclusive future. What better way is there than to do this together and through the bonds we forged with and within Antarctica?
So thank you very much. From the 14 women from 5 different homeward bound cohorts of the leadership training program that we've all been through. And I should also say thank you from Christiana and Miss Simbi for their foreword that they contributed to this book. We wrote this chapter collaboratively and we hope that you really enjoy it across 2 years and across many continents. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed embarking, crossing, arriving, exploring, returning and emerging, and then imagining with us.
Thank you so much, Homeward Bound. It really brings in the ethos of what this book was trying to achieve, what the continent provides us, and what we are trying to communicate to hopefully our wide and diverse audience to do better, to inspire, and to imagine in order to see how we can move forward with these ideas, with the continent, and with the planet. Again, the links are in the chat. The book is free to download, and there's 3 blogs summarizing some of the aspects. Ultimately, we hope that you are inspired. We hope that you do gain imagination. We hope that you do contribute, recognize all the limitations within the book, and do better in order to teach us. Because Antarctica affects us all. Antarctica represents us all. Antarctica is for us all. Thank you for Antarcticness.